This is Lisa Tucker, host of The Book Cover, which showcases local literary personalities. So listen to The Book Cover on the borderline. And remember, don't judge a book by its cover. Hi, I'm Lisa Tucker. You're listening on The Borderline, and this is The Book Cover. And my next guest, when they say write what you know, my next guest has definitely taken this to heart. He's written about the Greyhounds. He's written about Sault Ste. Marie, and his latest book called The West End, A Magical Place, created by giants, is all something close to his heart. Dr. Frank Sarlo, thank you for joining me again. I think this is time number 3.
This is time number 3, Lisa.
Time number 3.
And well, always happy to be here.
And if you keep writing, I'm going to keep having you on.
Well, I'll keep trying.
Yes. And now we touched on this book a little bit when we were talking about A Special Place.
Yes.
Because I remember being really excited about it. I'm from the West End. My dad was from the West End. My grandmother was from the West End. My kids were the 4th generation to go to St. Mary's Elementary School.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
So you know it was a magical place.
I do know. I come a little after, so I was in the 70s, where you're writing your time, which is a little bit before the 70s.
Yeah, it was another generation before you.
That's right. But I think that residual magic.
Yeah, one of the amazing things for me is whether you're born in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and now 70s, you know, that feeling was always the same.
It is. And I almost mentioned this at your book launch, how I could have done something really bad just as I got out of school. And by the time I actually walked home, my mom already knew about it. Because of the neighbors.
Yeah, of course.
The neighbors all watched each other's kids.
Yeah, and they would discipline you just as well as hug you.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. So why this book? I mean, I can give you lots of reasons why I'd love to read this book, and but why did you write it?
Well, it was something that people asked me to do on many occasions, but I was always afraid to do it. Okay, because I knew how strong the emotion was of people that really came from the West End. So, I really didn't want to do it. Okay.
You were afraid not to do it justice.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was really, really, really afraid.
Yeah.
But I went to Italy, to the place where my grandfather and my father were born. And it was a life-changing experience, actually, because when I went there, I saw the West End. Okay, because there were the gardens, were there. The people that met us, who I'd never met before, treated us like we were kings.
Yeah.
They were so happy they were there, invited us for meals. And it was,
if they knew your father or your grandfather,
they knew my grandfather, actually, yeah.
Yes,
and
that's
therefore
the way
they knew
are.
me.
That's right.
Yeah, but I had never met them before.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting experience for me, and it was eerie when they went to get the key for the church. And they opened the door for me, and I walk in, and it really was an eerie feeling because the colors were all the same as Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church, with the blues and golds and whites that were there. So I says, "This is crazy."
Right.
And he says, "No." He says, "Because our pastor went to Our Lady of Mount Carmel to raise money, and he was so enthralled with the color and the way it was set up that he came back and did the renovations here."
Wow.
So it was really something.
A little bit of the old neighborhood actually in Italy.
In Italy.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal feeling. So when I came back, I says, I have to do my best and try to do this. So I called a friend of mine, I don't know if you know Connie Moore, and we went for a walk around the West End now. And I didn't really realize how many houses there were there. In kids, we took it all for granted going from one house. But now looking at it and how far apart houses are.
Yeah.
And here there were houses upon houses.
Yeah.
Between the streets.
That's right.
It was really interesting to do. So I says, I'll give it a try. So I got lucky. There was a thesis that was done by a young lady by the name of Linda Carter, and she did
not Wonder Woman.
No.
Okay.
No, I haven't seen her, but
okay.
But she
a
was
different Linda Carter.
Yeah, but she did a great job on her thesis. It was for her master's at the St. Mary's University in Halifax.
Okay.
Anyway, she looked through at the West End through the eyes of the Sons of Italy, and therefore all of the past things were mentioned in her thesis. So it saved me probably a year's work of going back and researching. But what I found was something that I really wasn't ready for, because my grandparents and parents never said anything about the hard times. All they did was very positive feeling and a love for this country. So it was, though they had all of the traditions of Italy and the culture that was there. So when I saw what they went through, in my mind, I says, these were really giants. Okay, they came at the turn of the century in the 1900s. Okay, they came because of work, because things were so bad in Europe at the time that they had to leave to find work. So I try to picture my grandfather leaving with his wife and two small children there, him coming first to Chicago and then coming to work in the paper mill here, and what it must have felt like for him. Okay, having to scrimp and save to get enough money to send home, and then save enough to bring them over eventually. So it was there. So when he first came over, the Algoma Steel and the other companies that Clerg had created weren't ready for them. They went looking for them, but weren't ready. So they came over, had to live in tents. There was no water. They had to go to the river to clean themselves.
Wow, that's
and the clothes. There were no sewers until 1913. Wow. Okay, so there were ditches along there, and there was all the squalor, and that created a prejudice against the Europeans, okay, and the immigrants that had come over, because the Anglo-Saxons were living in the east side of the city, okay, and they had been here for a while. So these new immigrants coming in, they felt were the lower class because they had to leave, and they had the discrimination that was there for many years in doing it. So they not only had to go through that and discrimination, they had to go through the Depression and 2 world wars.
Yes.
And in the Second World War, because Mussolini had joined Hitler, there was the fear of internments.
Yep.
And across Canada, there were the internments of Italians that had been here. So though only 6 actually were interned from Sault Ste. Marie, there was always that fear of internment. And again, my grandparents never mentioned any of this when I was growing up.
It's a different breed. They didn't want, I don't want to say we're whiners now, but they did not talk negatively because they were thankful. Even though it was hardship, they were thankful for everything that they had because they worked at it and they started with zero, nothing.
And one of the articles in the Sault Star said the immigrants can live on $1 a week, whereas we'd starve.
Right?
So
because of the gardens, because of the raising rabbits, because of the chickens. Yeah,
it was all there, and they were self-sufficient.
Yep.
And then these people, once the sewers came in, started to create their own neighborhoods with their housing, and James Street came into being. So you had all of the businesses that ended up starting out on James Street. And in fact, the West End that we're talking about in the book is from Gore Street to West Street, and then from the CPR tracks to the river. And it's less than a half a square mile. And when you look at James Street and the amount of stores, there were 17 grocery stores in the West End, okay? And then every other kind of business.
Right.
So the West End was self-sufficient.
Yep.
You never had to go beyond Gore Street.
Right.
Okay, you had everything there. They created their church, and the thing that I didn't know, I knew obviously Our Lady of Mount Carmel because we were Catholic, but there was an Italian that started All People's United Church that was on the corner of Hudson Street and Albert Street. So,
Where the school, was there a school that ended up being there?
No, the school was down the way a bit.
Oh, okay.
No, there are apartment buildings there now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, it was something that I didn't realize. But going back and watching them create create a community was something special. The other thing that we don't realize today, they had no safety net. So, you talk a lot about the bootlegging that went on, but it was a way to survive.
Yeah.
Okay. And a couple of the people that I mentioned in the book, one lady in particular had 7 children. Okay, and her husband was killed on the job, and she had nothing.
She didn't get widow's pension. She didn't get anything from the government.
Nothing.
Yep.
So it was there, and she started bootlegging to put food on the table for her family. And she became pretty notorious in the West End. But what a wonderful woman she was.
What was her name?
She was, I probably shouldn't say.
No?
Okay, no.
Can you tell? Did she have a nickname?
Yes, Lil.
Okay.
Okay.
You don't want to end up with cement shoes.
No. It's not that. It's just that,
Out of respect.
it's very difficult for us to put ourselves in the shoes of people that were going through those things at the time. But, along with the safety net, they created the Marconi and the Verdi, who created simple safety nets. So, the Marconi had Dr. Gardy, that was any member could use Dr. Gardy, and he would make house calls. Okay? In my particular case, it was the biggest storm in Sault Ste. Marie, snowstorm at the time. Mm-hmm. And he was at the hospital and had to come by snowshoes from the hospital to Queen Street West, just in front of West Street, okay, where I was born. And it was funny. My father used to talk about how he had to shovel snow all night to just keep a path so that he could get into the house. And when he got there, he was so cold, they opened the brandy before I was born and had it for, of course, just to get warm.
Sure.
And then I think they finished the bottle after I was born.
Oh, of course.
Have to celebrate, right?
Right.
So, yeah, it was really interesting to find out. So I had a nickname when I was young, being Stormy. So.
Oh, very cool. And you hear, I of course share my stories with other West Enders, and you get very similar conversations about, and the pictures. I know the Sault Ste. Marie Public Library has a lot of photos from James Street in the old Jamestown, and you talk about the markets. The markets used to be all set up outside, like in front of these stores.
You'll enjoy seeing that in the book.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
yes.
There's photos of it in the book.
Oh, I've been happily gifted a book today, The West End, and I was saying how I can't wait to share this with my mom, because she'll really appreciate it. And my grandmother, if she would have still been with us, she would have really appreciated it.
And you'll notice on the front cover is the sketches done by Gene Ubriaco.
Yes, okay. And I was going to ask you how the tie-in came about.
And throughout the book, I divided the book into 6 different parts. Okay, and each part starts with another sketch.
Yes.
Okay, that's there. And I didn't know this, but Gene told me that he did them all by memory. So it's phenomenal when you look at that.
That's how ingrained the Sioux is.
Yeah.
The West End is.
Yeah, the other thing that I used to do my research on the book was going to the public library and the oral history.
Yes.
That was done by Kathy Chinook and Wendy Hamilton.
Yes.
And they have over 100 oral histories of Sault Ste. Marie, and there were 30-some on the West End, people from the West End from the 1930s and 40s.
Yes.
Which is there. So I watched all 50-some or 30-some and took 50 pages of notes from that. So I quote a lot of people in the book from there. And like I said earlier, it was phenomenal. I was born in the 40s, but the people in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and we all had the same feeling of that closeness and that bond about growing up there.
Sure. One story that you were talking about the oral histories. I remember I listened to a few of them when I was working there, and there was the one by Ray Stortini.
Yes.
And he talks about how somebody was bootlegging, and he hid the alcohol underneath the floors. So he had a subfloor built. Do you know the story I'm talking about?
Yes.
And the Mounties were onto him. So what they did was when the grocery boy would come and deliver his groceries,
They put a bottle in the bag.
They put a bottle or two in the bag, and that's how they got it out of the house while the Mounties were watching the house.
Yeah.
I love this.
It's amazing. The other story that I really like about the bootlegging, because it really was something for me. We had a group that used to meet at the Marconi once a month before COVID, and I was the youngest one there, and I just loved listening to all the stories that they would tell. Well, this one night, just before we're having dinner, Aldo Diatalevi, who's 101 years old, came in and asked, "Does anybody know Sandy Carbone?" And he says, "I've been trying to find somebody that knows him for a long time." And I says, "Aldo, that's my grandfather." So he says, "Well, I have to tell you the story." So he says that his father was a bootlegger during Prohibition, okay, and he used to sell the booze to the United States.
Yes.
Okay, but at that time, all of the sale of liquor was controlled. The illegal sale of liquor was controlled by the mafia out of Hamilton. So Aldo says he and his father were walking to the Marconi, and when they pass St. Mary's School, a black car pulls up. Two guys get out with the hats, and they call him over and want to take him behind the school. And he says, "No way." So he grabbed his son, and they ran into the Marconi. Okay. In the meantime, my grandfather was one of his best friends. So he was, I understand, a very daunting figure. Okay. And so he called Sandy. And he says, "Sandy, I'm in trouble. Can you come and help?" So supposedly, my grandfather then went and met them at Marconi, told them the story. And my grandfather walks out to the two guys, and he talks to them for about 10 minutes, and they get in the car and leave, and they never come back. Okay? Couldn't figure this out because my grandfather certainly wasn't one that had any money. They lived in a shack on Allen Street, okay,
Yes.
and being able to do it. But a couple months later, Aldo comes over to my house with a book called The Whiskey King, and it tells the story of the mafia and the Prohibition. So the Whiskey King out of Hamilton, his chauffeur was the same last name as my grandfather. So that must have been some connection.
Yeah, and you know what's funny? I've heard this story. And it's so funny how
it's
I will hear
on the
stories.
oral histories too.
Is it? Okay, maybe that's where I heard it. But so rich. The area is so rich with these great stories because you have people, again, like I said, they came there with nothing. So when you have a family or when you're a single mother of 7, and families were big back then. Like it was even when I was growing up. We were talking earlier before we started recording.
Family, 13 children.
The Kalitzas had the 13 children. In my age range, there were the Vecchios. There were 7 of them. There were the Lavernes. There were 7 of them. And that was not unheard of back then. But how do you, with all the things that, how do you feed these children? How do you...
Yeah, and
desperate times come for desperate measures.
Yeah, and you had the gardens and the rabbits and
Absolutely.
And the other animals that they did, and we never had a problem with food on the table. Okay, it was
same.
It was always there. But one of the stories that I love that's in the book was done by Vid Greco, and Ray Stertini had it in one of his books about Only in Canada, and it tells the story of the V.E. Greco family. And how the mother, Bridget, originally came from the United States, and her brother was a professor in one of the universities. So when she ends up marrying Jimmy Greco from the West End, and they migrate here, and he opens the V.E. Greco store. But she was always interested in education and really pushed for it. Okay, so she had 7 children. Okay, one was a doctor. The other was a dentist. One was in the health care as a nun. The other was a teacher as a nun. And
all super successful people.
All very, very.
And community.
All 7 were very, very successful in doing it. Well, it led me from there to take a look and say, what was the legacy of the West End? And then I was awestruck, with the number of people that came out of that half a square mile that have achieved so much in in their lifetimes.
Yeah.
In sports, just was phenomenal. The Espositos are from the West End, Lou Nanny, Gene Ubriaco, the first NHLer from Sault Ste. Marie, Don Grosso, the Count.
Yep.
He was from Albert Street. So you had so many, and
Fred Perlini Jr. He's another one.
Yeah,
from
so many.
Yeah.
Ronnie Francis's mother was born on Cathcart Street.
Yeah.
So it's amazing, and I try to put examples in the book, and at the end I have an appendix with all the ones that I know. Mm-hmm. So that's probably a small portion of what they are.
I'll probably be able to write some in at the back.
Yeah.
Some added
probably,
ones.
And actually, what Brian Davies, who's a publisher with Tagona Press,
Yes.
They started a website for the West End, and it's going to be a living history where people, if they have memories that they would like recorded, then they can put them on their website.
Oh, I love that. That it's going to take on a life of its own.
It will, because I couldn't put everything in the book, obviously.
No, I mean,
so
that would be like...
you have to pick and choose what you're doing.
Sure.
And it doesn't, and hopefully people feel, and from the first reports, people are really feeling good about the book.
Right.
Yeah, they're coming and saying, geez, thank you for writing it, because it brings back so many great memories.
Yeah, okay. yeah. And we're sitting here talking about the gardens and the rabbits and all that stuff. When I was growing up, I thought that was normal. Like almost everybody in my class had a garden out back. We went to pick the rhubarb in the back. We ate the rhubarb with sugar, and I thought that was normal. And, now, and then when I went to high school and started, mixing with people from the East End, right?
Yeah.
That's not normal. It was normal for us, but it's not normal for everybody.
No, it wasn't.
To have rabbits in the backyard or having tasted rabbit before I was 10, Yeah.
Another interesting thing is that, you now spread out throughout the city, but everything started in this small area and then spread out. And, the feeling that we had in there was one of community, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, without the safety net, besides the small amount that the Marconi and Verdi could do, you had to take care of each other.
Yeah.
So, your friends around and your neighbors, who were like family, and they took care of you. And you mentioned before, it wasn't different. They would hug you and kiss you and really tell you how great you were in whatever you did. Okay, yeah. But then they also disciplined you if you were doing something around. Yeah, that was there. and when you went to school, if the teachers ever called your parents, they would double up on whatever penalties that were there. There was no such thing as calling the teacher and saying you're not treating my...
Oh, could you imagine?
It never happened.
Now, I want to ask you, because this has always been in my mind, the Highline Bridge. Do you think the removal of the Highline Bridge was the start of the end?
Definitely.
The beginning of the
end? No doubt
end?
about it. In fact, I cover that in the book because everybody says it was urban renewal that did it. But there were actually three things that I know of. There was one was the High Line, which allowed people from Buckley and Cora to come through. And the main shopping area was James Street.
That's right.
So it was there. So when the High Line was cut off by Algoma Steel because they needed the property, then, James Street obviously, and all these grocery stores took a hit.
Yeah.
Okay?
Because now they're a dead end.
Yeah. And, it was just the people in the area. Okay. Then you had another thing. Supermarkets started. So you had Loblaws that opened, on Queen Street near Gore. Okay. And all of a sudden you can't compete.
Yes.
Right? So little by little. But the other thing that really did it was that the next generation, right? You had the first generation were there. And the second generation slowly moved out of the West End to other parts of the city. And then when the next my generation came, everybody was moving out. So James Street in the 60s really couldn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And when James Street couldn't exist, then you had the people there. Then urban renewal came in, and people say it was urban renewal that killed the West End, but it was only one one of the effects that was there. And in fact, for many people, it was a godsend because they were able to buy their houses, and then they were able to move to new houses. You know, part of my family was the same thing. One of my uncles, they took over the house on Rome Street, and they were able to then build a house on Caesar Road. So, you know, it was all part of what happens in life.
Yes.
Okay, change and,
That's right.
and things progress to a different thing. But I was lucky that I lived in the West End from when I was born to when I left for university.
Wow.
Okay, so, you know, and then I was away during those years. And then when I came back, the time that I graduated from law school, I got married 2 weeks before I got my call to the bar.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and then
to lovely
obviously
Laura,
was there.
who I just love her.
Yeah,
You're a lucky man.
yeah, we're 55 years now.
Wow.
So yeah, I know how lucky I am. God bless her.
Yes, I love her. She's
an amazing
awesome.
person.
And you just had, well, I guess we can call it a book launch and book signing, and you did a little bit of a reading at 45 Social. I always want to call it 49th Apparel. 45 Social.
Actually, we had the first one at the Italian Festival.
Oh, yes.
And it was absolutely amazing.
Right.
Okay, the number of people coming over, and it was like old home week, and being able to do it, and I was so happy that we're there. And then we have people like Marnie Stone, who's carried the book. Okay, and
she's a great
she is. She really
of local
supports.
art. Yeah,
she really is something special. And then it was the Bush Plain Museum, the art gallery, and there's books. They have a special place, and some of them have the West End.
I love it.
Okay, yeah.
And then a future event for people wanting to sort of get a little bit of this vibe. November 15th events. 14th?
Yeah.
November 14th at the Marconi. Tell us about that event.
Yeah, the Marconi Cultural Event Center and the Group Health Trust Fund are presenting Celebrate the West End. And they asked me to do a book signing that be there and to give a little talk. But I'll be the smallest part of what's happening there. Vin Greco is going to tell the story of the V.E. Greco family, which I think is just a great story.
Sure.
Okay, and Gene Ubriaco is hoping to be here. Okay, and we're going to be having books for sale and his sketches.
And his prints.
Yeah, we're doing a special thing on the prints that will be there. And then there'll be door prizes and things like that. And then I don't know if you know the group Frankie Productions.
I don't.
They have a 40-minute set of Italian music that they did in Toronto Italian Festival.
Sure.
And they're going to do it here, and they have a video that goes with it. Stuff like that.
A bit of Shanta Mi Cantare.
Yeah. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But in fact, the night is going to be a multicultural night because the West End was multicultural.
Absolutely.
Okay. There were the people that were there were predominantly Italian in the far West End, but there were also Ukrainians, Croatians, and I even found out there was a Syrian. Okay, I don't know if you remember. His name slips me now.
And this is back in your day?
Yeah, back in my day.
Wow.
No, they were there before me.
Oh, wow.
Okay, but the family remained there.
Yeah.
But they had a store in James Street that they lost during the Depression. Okay, and then of course you had the French. Dubrays were on Cathcart Street. That was there. Then you had the Fortins and that. And then you had the Finnish district. Okay, where we used to go for saunas and things like that. Saunas.
Yes.
And then we used they had their own bakery. There were 3 Italian bakeries, but there was also the Finnish bakery that.
Well, you have to get your pula.
Was there? You had to get your pula, and supposedly the pies were the best of anywhere.
Wow.
That was there. I wasn't lucky enough to know that at the time. Okay,
right.
It was there, but it was there. So you had that, and then you had the French church, okay, which was Saint Ignatius.
Yes.
And that's where all the Italians went at the beginning until they had their own church when Our Lady of Mount Carmel opened in 1910. And then you had Blessed Sacrament.
I was baptized
right
there, yeah.
Okay. And that was Scottish and Irish and really Anglo-Saxon that was there. So you had this whole mixture of people that was there. So at the event, I've talked to the chef at the Marconi, and he's going to create the appetizer on a plate, individual plate for each person there. And there's going to be the 8 nationalities that are going to. So he's doing a bite from each one, and we'll have the flag of the nationality there.
I love
and then
that.
What an amazing meal they put together and donated. They're just covering their costs.
Yeah.
And being able to do it so that the Group Health Trust Fund will
some
benefit.
fundraising.
Benefit. So I'm happy to be associated. But the rest of the menu, they're going to have Manelli's Cappelletti soup.
Yes.
And then they're having the ravioli and meatballs.
Of course.
And then again go to multicultural.
Yeah.
They're going to have cordon bleu.
Of course.
Yes.
And
then they're going to have the cabbage rolls.
Of course.
That are going to be there.
Yes.
Okay. And then for dessert, they're going to have an Aboriginal dessert called
Bannock.
Betek.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
And being able to do it, which is a crust, okay, that has ice cream and cream in the middle with fruit condiment on top. And I tasted it's absolutely delicious.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Now, where can people get these tickets?
At the Marconi.
Okay.
Okay. And they'll be selling tickets and tables. Okay. The tables are tables of 8. So anybody that wants to organize a table, they're more than welcome to do. We already, the marketing just started today, and we already have 120 tickets sold.
Wow.
So it's
going to be
great.
well received.
Yeah, I hope.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important to celebrate our past.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think in the recent past, it hasn't been. I think it's time to get that pendulum to swing the other way and get back to the roots.
And understand where you came from.
Yes, right? Absolutely. Because we're a good place to come from.
Yeah, we sure are. We sure.
Just toting another book.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Yeah. With Morley. Yeah.
Right, that's right.
So it was great. So hopefully the last third of the book is my story. Okay, from when I was born to when I went away.
I'm going to read that one first.
Yeah.
No,
you can't do that.
I can't?
No, because it's important to understand what comes before it. Okay.
You can't tell me what to do.
Yes, I can.
But what I do want to say is if anybody's looking for the book, we mentioned downstairs at Stone's. It will be available on tagonapress.ca. I believe it's CA. And they'll also have the Ubriaco prints for sale. Brian Davies was telling me he's going to also have them. And will it be available on Amazon and all the electronic?
Yeah, actually, when you go to Tagona Press, it's Amazon that does it.
Oh, routes you to.
And there's free delivery on that.
Beautiful. Is it you? Great. Are you delivering it?
I delivered quite a few, but no, these are actually from Amazon.
Oh, it is. Okay. I'm hearing from our research person that it's tagonapress.com, not .ca, and I always forget that. That's what I want to make sure. If you can believe it, we've been talking for over half an hour.
Oh, no kidding.
I could listen to West End.
Yeah,
I know. I could listen to West End stories all night long. Thank you for coming for the third time.
Well, thank you. And I have my new book coming out shortly, which is Houndtown Revisited.
Yes.
Okay, so it's going to cover the last 8 seasons. And I've been extremely fortunate that we're going to see the 8 seasons through the eyes of Brad Cochimillo, who has been the sports writer for Sault Ste, for 8 years and beyond.
Yeah.
That. So it's really, I've got part of the writing. It's really super. And then Bob Davies agreed to give us all the photos that we're going to put in. So the first book is going to be Brad's thoughts and how he saw the 8 seasons. Then there's going to be the second book portion is going to be all of these beautiful photographs that Bob has done. And then the third section is me writing about behind the scenes. So,
those are the juicy bits.
Yeah, so you learn about what goes on in there. I was lucky enough to interview Kyle Raftis, Tim Lukenda, John Dean, and the assistant assistance also.
I'm just going to keep on nodding my head because I'm not a sports girl.
Okay.
So I will keep on nodding my head. Anyway, thank you so much for coming again. Thank you so much for this book. I can't wait to read it and talk to my mom about it and talk to my family about it. It's called The West End, A Magical Place Created by Giants by Frank Sarlo. Thanks so much, Frank.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate it.
Of course. You've been listening to The Book Cover on the Borderline. I'm Lisa Tucker. And remember, don't judge a book by its cover.
This is Frank Sarlo, the author of The West End, A Magical Place Created by Giants. You can get your copy of the book from tagonapress.com, and you can get free delivery. I listen to Lisa Tucker in the book cover. Okay, she does a phenomenal job at promoting local authors. Listen to it on the Borderline.